Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden Podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the weekending show team from Lionheart Radio. It's a chance to take a wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and it's an opportunity to hear stories from the past and present. In this episode, Planetary Awareness with Tom Pattinson, who's focused on being kind to Mother Earth and on ways in which we can all help to make this a wonderful world. We're out and about with Tom Cadwallender, who's keeping a canny count of our winged wonders, dropping macaroni in nests. And he reveals another great place for watching birds. Plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P, all coming up on the Nature Garden Podcast. There's so much talk these days of ways to save the planet. Well, of course, we can all do our bit around the house and in the garden. And in the UK, well, some things like our use of peat-based compost is changing, but are things changing quickly enough? Here's Tom with some views on all of that and some news of an exciting festival.
I'm talking about changes in gardening, some which have to be made as a matter of urgency. The pollution of the planet with plastics, the use of finite resources such as peat, the use of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, control, and we can all do a little bit to contribute towards preserving a good planet. My attention was first drawn to this in the 1970s as a student. I picked up Rachel Carson's soft paperback Silent Spring, which had been published in the early 1960s, and it referred to the use of persistent pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, which were polluting the planet, but were having an adverse effect on living things, on plants and animals especially, passing up through the food chain. That gave me my template. I still thumb through it occasionally, still on the bookshelf, well worn I'm afraid, but still in one piece. Have a look at that and see what you think. It's continued, this banning of pesticides especially, and most recently anyone who kills slugs, I don't lay poison for slugs. There are mechanical ways of dealing with them, the beer trap and various other ways which you can discover if you do a little bit of research. But these slug pellets contain metaldehyde, a poison, spread by Brand. There was Brand there as well, but it was fine. They're banned. You can't buy them any longer. They've been replaced by ferrous phosphate, which apparently kills slugs still and snails, but it's a beneficial effect. The ferrous dissolves into iron in the soil and the phosphate into phosphorus, so the plant benefits as well. In the past, when metaldehyde was used, you can imagine the snail, say, has gobbled some of it, it's in the throes of dying, it's picked up by an innocent song thrush and bashed about and eaten, and several of those song thrush doesn't really stand a chance. Things like that please me when I see that something has been banned, it's been harming a member of the environment. Remember, plants and animals especially, they have to be around, because if anything affects them in the environment adversely, who is next in line? Humankind. We need those plants and animals to survive. if you're considering helping to save the planet, there are various things to do. Try to avoid, very difficult to avoid using plastics, planting, ordering plants by mail, and those plants arrive covered in a plastic cocoon to protect them. It's used in our shopping for groceries, etc. But plastics are widespread, so is plastic pollution. We've got to think about that one. But the big one for me is peat. When I read the basics of peat itself, the statistics surrounding it, it's less than 1% of the Earth's surface has peatlands. Just less than 1%. Yet peat absorbs 25% or stores 25% of the world's carbon output. That's quite amazing. So of course we can't continue digging away at peat and using it in our compost. More disturbing was the fact that garden centres are still selling peat-based compost. Some of them have lowered the peat base, but it is still in compost. And we, as amateur gardeners, consume, in terms of consuming gardening with compost, we consume 3 million cubic metres of peat in a year. Quite amazing. The ban is coming soon, and not soon enough. There are substitutes which I use, which are very useful. Talking to people, like-minded people, is something I relish the chance to do. And coming up from June the 23rd to the 26th, Thursday to Sunday, at the Playhouse and Annick Garden, there is a wonderful festival called What a Wonderful World. It's organised by Liz and Alistair Anderson, and it's about pending global warming. It is upon us, global warming. This will cover arts, science, the natural world, lots of talks, music, poetry, plays, you name it. Look out for it. There's a reference to it. It is www.whataw.org. That's www.whataw.org. What a wonderful world.
Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology is one of those hardy fieldwork folks who keeps tabs on bird populations so we know how they are faring. He's been looking at the ups and downs of eiders and terns, and amidst all the science, Tom, I do hope you've remembered the physics of bird droppings and beaks.
People get into birding for a great variety of reasons. Mainly, though, it's through either the aesthetic idea, or the fact that birds are pretty, or they're doing interesting things. They want to get into that sort of side of it. Sometimes people get into birding through just listing, whether it's travelling the country or county looking for and looking at rare birds, which is fine. And then there is the scientific side of things. People are interested in populations, the behaviour, and that sort of thing. Or it's a combination of all of those. And for me, it's actually a combination. I got into it because of somebody sort of attracted my attention. But then I realised what it was all about. And really, all those things kind of drive me on. But these days, I'm really into surveying birds. And it's the idea that we understand more about bird populations and movements and so forth. And I kind of think that it's back on the trail of the old BTO, the British Trust for Ornithology. I'm kind of dyed-in-the-wool BTO, and I've been regional rep for Northumberland for 40 years. And it's the knowledge and the thought that we actually need to have good, solid data about bird populations that we need, so we can actually convince the powers that be about sort of policy and so forth. And it's that whole idea, long-term trends are good because we can actually make some really quite good decisions on that. We can actually understand how bird populations are fluctuating. We do know that, there is a kind of a year-on-year change. So you never really should kind of judge a bird's welfare, species welfare or population on the strength of just 1 or 2 years. You need to think about the bigger picture. And that's what we do within the BTO, and that's what I do personally. I work as a volunteer surveyor, and I work as a professional surveyor. So yes, it's that idea of collecting good solid data. And I often think back to the longest running survey that the BTO have, and it's the heronry census. And this has been running since the early 1930s, which is quite a long period of time. But what we see there is massive fluctuations of density of breeding birds and so forth. And if we looked at the graph over a period of just a few years, you would see some huge falls, particularly on the back of cold winters, because herons are generally not migratory. But what you wouldn't probably get is the fact that these birds or the bird population will recover, and it does over a given time. And actually, from the 1930s to present day, we see that the heronry census, the populations are really quite stable, believe it or not, with some massive fluctuations in amongst it all. However, so that's just kind of setting the scene. But in the last sort of 10 days or so, I've been on Coquet Island. I'm very privileged to get a chance to go across to Coquet to help with the RSPB and their monitoring programme. And we started off with Eidas, and Eidas are quite interesting. They're, the big ducks, these Eider ducks, county bird of Northumberland. And when the reserve was first created back in the 1970s, and the designation of an SSSI was put on it, the Eidas had a population of something like 310, 320, somewhere in that order. However, since then, we've noticed that there's been this gradual decline, and the census of about 10 days ago we were down to 207 pairs, or 207 nesting attempts on the island, which is a third down on where we were 40 years ago. So we're seeing this long-term decline in the Eider population. And that's thought to be as a result of the females coming out of winter, not good enough fettle to raise the correct size or enough chicks or ducklings. And so we see that trend going on there. And that's something that we have to recognise. And it's quite a concern, because they're obviously not getting enough food, and that's what we think. They're not getting enough food in the wintertime. So we need to try and to think about how we can get over that. The other species that we've been looking at is black-headed gulls, and black-headed gulls have done so well, actually. Quite an interesting sort of process, counting the birds. We walk in kind of transects over the island and counting the number of nests as we go. And the black-headed gull population is on the up, which is a contrast to the Eidas. And just last week we were on the island looking for sandwich tern nests, and this will make you laugh. Actually, they're packed so densely, these sandwich terns, and they're doing very, very well. By the way, what the technique we use is each of us have a bag of macaroni. But dried pasta, and it's all counted out though, so we know exactly how many pieces of macaroni that we have in our bags, and we go around in a systematic way and dropping a piece of macaroni in the nests of these sandwich terns, and we count the numbers of bits of macaroni we have when we get back, and that gives us we do the numbers, and that gives us a clue to how the population's doing. Actually, the sandwich tern population is steadily rising, and we know that. We can see the trend through over a number of years, and that's really quite encouraging. But personally, on a downside for going to survey these birds, is that you haven't to go through Arctic terns, and we'll be censusing Arctic terns shortly. But you have to go through the colony. And stupidly, I forgot my hat, because we wear our kind of our poop gear, because we get sort of pooped on quite a bit by these birds. But everyone put the hats on, and I kind of, we'll be all right. And I had left it in the on the jetty, and I got whacked on the head by an Arctic tern, blood streaming down my face. Oh, goodness me! And that was a timely reminder that I shouldn't forget that that I should be wearing my hat when we get into these colonies, because these terns' bills are really sharp and they can give you a mighty thwack, and it's quite painful as well. So yes, that was a useful one. But thinking about the bird censusing as a whole, you do your work on the offshore islands, and what you have to remember, you count the birds on the island, but what you have to remember is that actually sometimes bird populations are not just on your island or in your nature reserve, they're actually spread over quite a wide period. Take, for example, puffins. Puffins nest on Coquet Island, they nest on the Farne Islands, they nest on the Isle of May. And these three colonies are viewed as a kind of a meta-population, so they're all kind of mixing around and they're moving around between each colony. So they're censused every 5 years, and it's quite tricky. But what you have to remember is that the puffins are given to great fluctuations in numbers, because they will move colony. They will change from either the Farnes to Coquet and vice versa, to the Isle of May and vice versa. So they will travel around a wee bit. And you've got to be careful that you don't make your statements and your management policies on the strength of just 1 year's account in isolation to the other places. So you've got to see things in context. You've got to see things in the round, so you can actually sort of have a reasonable handle. Because if you cry too often about numbers crashing, people get wary of that. But puffin is a bird that we're going to lose numbers of in about 10 to 15 years. It has been forecast for a wee while, because they're going to suffer from the vagaries of climate change, and their food, the sand eel, is going to move further north. So we need to make sure that we have a good steady handle on what the bird numbers are doing, and not thinking in isolation, thinking about the bigger picture in a regional sense. And that's how we'll figure it all out. So science is going to be the end of it all, I'm sure. We need to make sure that our data is really quite robust. But in the meantime, when you go out to census these birds, it's absolutely fantastic, because you get into the middle of the colony and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful to be so close to these birds. It's terrific, a real thrill. And I am thrilled. So yes, counting bird numbers. Spring is the time to count birds. So there we are. Take care, folks, and gan canny.
Tom Pattinson showing how our green fingers really are good news for the planet. While some of our tools have barely changed over the years, the way we garden is evolving fast, and Tom's fresh back from the Chelsea Flower Show, and you know what? He's feeling very inspired.
To the untrained eye, gardening must appear quite boring. Same tools, same crops each year. Flowers, vegetables, fruits. Nothing changes. Nothing could be further from the truth. Take tools, for example. Okay, so the rake, the hoe, the spade, the fork, they've changed very little over the centuries. Same design, basically. Little touches here and there to improve, perhaps. If you go to the Vindelander Roman Fort Museum, just inside Hadrian's Wall, to the west of Northumberland, fantastic museum. You'll see in the display cabinet there a spade, other tools of course in iron, but a spade, a wooden spade which was excavated, dug up from the lower reaches of the 2nd century Christian era, and it's the same design, quite amazing. Same shape, spade, you guess immediately that's a spade. So in that respect, gardening doesn't change so much. But daily almost, there are changes to plant names. Daily almost, weekly, hybridists are coming up with a new type of plant. And that is part of change. If we look at the way we're dealing with the planet and the changes to the planet, it affects gardeners too, in terms of the pesticides, the fungicides, the herbicides we use, that is ever changing in the correct right direction as far as I'm concerned. So gardening does change, for goodness sake. I went to Chelsea Flower Show 2 weeks ago, and I'm looking for new varieties because the nurserymen, the growers, the hybridists, they keep on throwing new varieties at it, which is exciting, of course. A new plant to grasp the name of and attempt to grow and see if it's any better than what already exists. I saw amongst them a succulent. It won Plant of the Year. There is a competition within the big competitions for nurserymen who've developed new plants. And a succulent is a plant with fleshy leaves, hold lots of moisture, therefore they're generally drought resistant, ideal for the future with global warming on the agenda, big time. And it's one of those things called a house leek. The house leek is called a sempervivum. There's another type of succulent called Ionium, totally different in appearance really, apart from the fact that they both form a big rosette of those fleshy leaves. So they've crossed, or this chap had crossed a sempervivum with an Ionium, and he took the first part of the sempervivum's name and the second part of the Ionium name, and he's calling this new variety, this new creation, Semponium. And the cultivar name or varietal name is Destiny. It has beautiful deep red veiny leaves all year round and yellow flowers set against those. Now succulents might not be everyone's idea of a brilliant plant, but this was quite stunning. A new plant, change immediately. One of my favourite herbs is rosemary. Rosmarinus, and the fragrance of that. It has blue flowers, but the fragrance, when you're passing, you don't mistake it for any other herb because rosemary has a very distinctive fragrance coming from those leaves when you brush past. It has recently been changed, the name that is, and now it's a salvia, member of the sage family. The reasoning being, when Linnaeus first laid out the code for naming plants, it was based on their physical appearance. Now, they are into genetics, and it's the genetic structure of the plant that counts. Therefore, many more plants their names are being changed. Little changes we have to deal with, but they're all part of gardening. You can still buy heritage varieties of plants. I'm thinking of an apple. The apple was called Flower of Kent, and in the mid-1600s, it was a beautiful cooking apple. It still is, it still exists. It's one of those heritage varieties. But when Isaac Newton decided to sit underneath it, and one fell on his head, it was immediately more or less changed to the Isaac Newton apple. And who doesn't want to buy an apple that's a bit of history?
Tom Cadwallender's been looking at great places to watch our feathered friends, and this week he's taking a bird-watching walk in the beautiful valleys of the Cheviot Hills, where he's listening and looking out for dippers, warblers, pipits, and so much more. Over to you, Tom Cadwallender.
Continuing the theme of where to watch birds in Northumberland. The last time I talked about bird watching in Druidge Bay. But actually, when it comes to the spring, you get to the kind of late spring and into the early summer, there's no finer place than getting into the hills of North Northumberland and the Cheviots. Some of these valleys are absolutely fabulous, and that kind of make an annual homage, if you like, big trail to these lower Cheviot valleys and the upper Cheviot valleys. And one of my favourites is actually the Harthope. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Harthope, but the Harthope is the one that runs to gets into the base of Cheviot. And if you were going to walk onto Cheviot, I'm not advocating you should. I'm not advocating you shouldn't, but it'd be great if you did. But pick the right day. But yes, it gets you into there. And what I like to do is stay in the valley bottom a bit, not go on to the highest points. But the birds you're likely to see are just great. Some of them are summer visitors, and some of them are are regulars in the uplands, and resident birds, things like red grouse. And if you go at the right time, coming sometime now, there's a lot of activity, and you can hear the red grouse calling from right across through the valley as you're travelling up. You can hear the go back, the go back noise they make. It's quite distinctive. This is red grouse, and they're right in the middle of the breeding season, and this is something which is you kind of go up on the hills to see. But it's not just the red grouse. You can chance upon all sorts of birds of prey as well. We see peregrines, and we can see kestrels and so forth, and owls even. And occasionally, white-tailed eagle has floated across the Hearthope Valley. And there's quite a major release program in the Isle of Wight, believe it or not, of white-tailed eagle. These white-tailed eagles are huge birds, and they were being made extinct through persecution. And there's been some release programs which has made quite a lot of difference. Anyway, the birds that have been released have got satellite trackers on them, and the bird that was released in the Isle of Wight last year. Oh, no, sorry, it was the year before, has been seen or recorded in North Northumberland. I saw it actually at Lindisfarne last autumn. But yeah, we get reports of these big birds of prey, and they're actually bigger than golden eagles, much bigger than buzzards. So yes, but the white-tailed eagle has been floating around, and then we learned subsequently that it was the Isle of Wight bird. We know that through its satellite tracking system. So there's always a chance of seeing something exciting like that. But when you go up to these upland valleys, and the one I'm thinking of is the Hearthope, and you get into the Hearthope, coming either from Wooler in the north, and you drop into the Happy Valley, and you work your way through there, or you come in from the south through Middleton, but it both get you into the same place. And there's a kind of a parking place right at the neck of the valley, and you can walk from there. And there's a little small valley running off of the Hearthope, and it's the Carey Burn. That runs sort of northwest from the main valley. And up there, you wander up there, and you're going to see dippers on the burn. You're going to see grey wagtails on the burn. And there's a good chance you'll hear cuckoos around the place. But as you work your way up the valley, the tight valley, there's a good chance of seeing ring-ouzel. Ring-ouzel is a relative of the blackbird. They're a thrush, but they're a migrant thrush, and they go down to kind of the Iberian Peninsula and North Africa for winter, and they get back here. But these ones are similar size to a blackbird, perhaps a slightly bit larger, but they've got a white crescent around their upper breast and lower throat, and they're quite distinctive, and they'll sit on top of sparse trees and call and sing away. So they're nice to look out for. But as you're walking up, you should also look out for the white rumps of the wheatear as they fly away, and they're quite distinctive. They never sit too long, but as they fly, you'll see them, and they're easily recognised because of their white rumps. And they like to sit on stones. They like to be on the boulders, on the cobbles, and things like on the screes. So you'll see them in there. But as you're walking up, you're going to hear yellowhammers singing. You're going to hear reed buntings occasionally. But there's a good chance of picking up redstarts in those upper valleys as well, upper reaches of the valley. But once you've done in there, you come back down to the main valley and walk your way up to towards Langley and Langley Ford Hope, or not as far as Langley Ford Hope, to Langley Ford. As you go up, you're going to hear tree pipits, and meadow pipits are very common, but you'll hear tree pipits as well. So you might have to practice the call about what the tree pipits sound like. But you'll hear cuckoos in the valley, and just keep an eye out. You might see a very large crow come over with a wedge-shaped tail, with a big conch on it, and that's going to be a raven coming over, and they've got a deep onk sort of noise as they fly over. But you're kind of checking the valley bottoms, and you're checking the river, because there's common sandpipers in there. Common sandpipers are a wading bird, small wading bird, which comes all the way from the Iberian Peninsula or North Africa to that's its winter quarters, to breed in this part of the world. All these upland valleys will have common sandpipers in them, or common sands as we kind of call them. But also you'll see dippers in there. Dippers, as you'll remember, are these small dark dog birds with this quite white bib on their breasts. And they spend all the time in the river. And they've got this kind of crazy way of walking underwater on the riverbed. And they'll catch caddisfly larvae and so forth. That's what they like to eat. So they're going to be up there as well. But all the while you're going to hear other birds singing. And as you get into the kind of the scrub woodland for me is one of the bestest habitats ever, because it contains all sorts of birds. As you get a bit further up into the between Langley Ford and Langley Ford Hope, you're into sort of rowan and birch scrubland. And you could hear redstarts, you could hear pied flycatchers, and I hear this year there's a wood warbler in there. Wood warbler under some pressure. Actually, the population is in quite a lot of decline. But it's just the sheer delight of going into these places and seeing the abundance of specialist birds. And when you're in the kind of the wooded bits, you're going to be picking up siskins, which are small kind of greenfinch type birds, and you're going to pick up potentially pick up crossbills as well. You know, you never know because of the conifer plantation. So and lesser red poles, little linnet-like birds. So there's a lot of specialist birds in here. So if you're looking for a bird watching walk at this time of year, you could do a lot worse than getting into the Harthope Valley and either taking the little side shoot of the Kerryburn or the Horsenburn, but actually, or just spending time in the bottom of the valley, you'll surely come out with a great bird list. So that's good. I hope you've enjoyed if you go. All the best, folks. Gan canny.
Here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
Well, it's shops for the week time. Hedges. Oh, we can cut the hedges at last. We last cut them way back in November to trim them up, to make them look pleasant, neat during winter. And we have hedges on all four boundaries of the garden. They're lovely and dense. There is a beech hedge, which is supposedly deciduous, but it hangs on to its leaves until the very last moment of spring when the new leaves appear. So it's fairly dense and good for birds. There's a privet hedge, which is evergreen, of course, and the hawthorn keeps quite a bit of its leaf as well. So birds have a whale of a time here. They nest in the hedge, and I love it because there's a good presence in the garden. But from November until now, we haven't been able to touch those hedges because didn't want to disturb the birds. Now we can trim them. Hallelujah. Take it easy, and if you're using an electric cutter, for goodness sake, watch that cable. Don't cut into it. Take all the precautions you can. And if your electric cutter becomes chugged up with the blades with a thicker branch, stop the electricity if you're going to clean it, for goodness sake. Better still use a circuit breaker at the socket, at the source. I can cut the hedges now. Brilliant. And lots of birds still going round, young being fed, but I've checked round, no nests in there. The other thing that's bugging me at the moment is one or two of the tomatoes. They dry out very quickly. I've got a decent bulky compost which has got soil in it, basic soil, and they're drying out very quickly at this stage. So every day I'm checking them. Spray over the top, give them a little tap. I do that in the middle of the day. They are self-fertile, but that helps set the pollen, set the fruit, which is what I'm after. But don't let them dry out. Once they start sagging their leaves, take a little bit to recover from that. They never really recover from that initial shock. So keep them well watered. If there's good drainage in the pots or in the compost or in the border, if they're growing in the border, they should be okay. Next up are the vegetables outdoors there. I have the sweet corn out, and it stood up very well. It was planted out quite early, but there were young plants, and most of my vegetables are sown and raised in pots, so they transfer brilliantly into the garden soil and they zoom away in growth. They've been dry recently. We haven't had a good downpour of rain or a steady fall of rain over several hours, so I've had to be out there with the can watering them. Make sure they don't dry out completely. And another thing with the vegetables, especially the salad crops, I'm thinking of the radishes and the leaf lettuce. I don't grow the hearting type of lettuce, wait too long for the hearts. I grow the leaf lettuce and sow it in drills and sow it at something like about 3-week intervals, 3 weeks to a month throughout summer, because if it dries out at all, it becomes a bit bitter to taste. So keep watering your lettuce, that's the leaf lettuce, and after 3 to 4 weeks, sow another little drill, so you've got some fresh lettuce coming on and a supply all the way through summer. Make sure that that's done, the lettuce and the radishes. Other thing, key at the moment, is the strawberries. Those blackbirds, the strawberries have swollen, they're large, but they're green. And they're not nowhere near ripe, yet the blackbirds are pecking them, and rather than concentrate on one strawberry, they're going from one to another. So I've had to net them, I'm afraid, but if you're putting netting on, be sure that it covers completely, way down at the edges and at the base with the soil. Don't want the birds getting in, panicking and upsetting themselves and damaging themselves. I don't want that. I'd just like to have some ripe strawberries. And I don't mind sharing them with them later in the season when we've had most of the picking and still get plenty from them. Final thing, people keep talking about a June gap in flowers. We haven't any gaps in flowering periods in this garden in June because we've got a lot of plants which are flowering at the moment. We've got herbaceous perennials. We've got the lovely geranium in pink and in blue. That's the herbaceous geranium in the border. We've got various colours of foxgloves, the big spikes coming up, and the bees are hiding themselves inside, searching for pollen, nectar, and then coming out again. I just love watching that. Aquilegia, ladies' bonnets, call it what you will. It is also in full flower, variety of colours. There are garden pinks with their fragrance, just beautiful carnation-type plants, absolutely brilliant in the evening and when it's been raining. And of course the big balls of purple allium, member of the onion family. It's flowering at the moment, but 2 plants that really take it are the Weigela Florida variegata. It is absolutely covered in variegated foliage and pink flowers, about the size of a 50-penny piece. Brilliant. Best of all is the Californian lilac. Wow, it is covered in blue flowers, and close your eyes when you stand next to it. It's also covered in bumblebees, especially bumblebees. What a buzz it is causing in the garden. Whatever you're doing this coming week, enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson and birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology. I'm Carl Steinson, and don't forget you can listen back to all the previous reports we've done on the Nature Garden podcast. That's the Nature Garden podcast. Enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature, and bye for now.